The train station noise disappeared. His hand gripped his mistress's waist, but his eyes were locked on her, the woman he destroyed 10 months ago. She was walking toward him, slowly, carrying a newborn in her arms, his child, the baby he never knew existed. His mistress whispered something venomous beside him, but he couldn't hear it. All he could see was the woman he once called his wife, the one he threw away like she meant nothing, standing there with proof that he had been wrong about everything. She wasn't there to beg. She wasn't there to cry. She was there to destroy him, and she had the power to do it. The train station smelled like rain and gasoline. He hated this place. Too loud, too crowded, too human. But she had insisted, his mistress, Vanessa, wanted to take the evening train to the countryside estate, where her father was hosting a private gala. Politicians, crime lords, dirty money wrapped in champagne glasses. The kind of party where everyone smiled and no one was clean. He didn't care about the party. He cared about control. And being seen with her, the daughter of Senator Greaves, meant power, influence, protection. So he stood there, one hand in his coat pocket, the other resting on her lower back, scanning the crowd with the cold efficiency of a man who had survived too many betrayals to trust anyone. Vanessa leaned into him, her perfume sharp and expensive. She was beautiful in the way sharp things are beautiful. All edges, all calculation. She whispered something about the gala, about her father's plans, about how they needed to be careful. He wasn't listening. Because across the platform, through the shifting crowd of strangers, he saw her, and the world stopped. She was thinner than he remembered. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She wore a simple coat, nothing like the elegant dresses she used to wear when she was his. But it wasn't her appearance that made his chest tighten. It was the baby. A tiny bundle wrapped in white, cradled against her chest. She was rocking the child gently, her gaze distant, exhausted. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Lila, his ex-wife, the woman he had walked away from 10 months ago without explanation, without mercy. He had ended it cleanly, coldly, because that's what men like him did. They didn't explain. They didn't apologize. They simply erased. But now she was here. And she wasn't alone. Vanessa's voice cut through the fog in his mind. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Lila, on the baby in her arms. The timing was impossible to ignore. 10 months, almost to the day. No, he had been careful. Always careful. But looking at her now, at the exhaustion in her face, the way she held that child like it was the only thing keeping her alive, he knew. He knew. Vanessa followed his gaze. Her body went rigid. "Who is that?" He didn't respond. He was already moving. Lila felt him before she saw him. It was the same feeling she used to get when he entered a room. A sudden shift in the air. A quiet danger that made her spine straighten. She had spent 10 months trying to forget that feeling. 10 months learning to live without it. But now it was back. And so was he. She looked up. Their eyes met across the platform. For a moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the station faded. The crowd disappeared. It was just the two of them, and the baby sleeping in her arms. His face was exactly as she remembered, hard, unreadable. The face of a man who had built an empire on fear and silence. But there was something else there now. Something she hadn't seen in a long time. Shock. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. She had come here for this. She had prepared for this. but nothing could have prepared her for the way her heart still broke when she looked at him. He stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough to see the faint lines of sleeplessness around her eyes, close enough to hear the soft, steady breathing of the baby. Lila. His voice was low, controlled, but she heard the fracture beneath it. She didn't respond. She just looked at him, her expression calm, unreadable. The same mask he had taught her to wear. Behind him, Vanessa appeared, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete. She stopped at his side, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. What is this? Lila's gaze shifted to her. The woman who had taken her place. The woman who had been sleeping in his bed while Lila was giving birth alone in a hospital, clutching their son with trembling hands. Vanessa was everything Lila wasn't. Polished, powerful, connected. The kind of woman who belonged in his world. But Lila wasn't here to compete. She was here to survive. Who are you? Vanessa's voice was sharp, territorial. Lila didn't answer her. She looked back at him. We need to talk. His jaw tightened. Not here. Yes, here. Vanessa's hand curled around his arm, possessive. I don't know who you are, but... She's my ex-wife, he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a guillotine. Vanessa's face went pale, then red. You're what? He didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the baby in Lila's arms. Is that... Yes, Lila said simply. Silence. Vanessa's voice rose, sharp and furious. You've got to be kidding me. Lila finally looked at her. I'm not here for you. Then what are you here for? Vanessa snapped. Money? Is that it? You show up with some baby and expect... His name is Ethan. Lila interrupted, her voice steady. And he's your heir. The words hit him like a bullet. He stared at the baby, at his son, and something inside him cracked. Vanessa laughed bitterly. This is insane. You don't even know if that baby is his. Lila's expression didn't change. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. She held it out toward him. DNA results, she said. If you don't believe me. He didn't take it. He just kept staring at the baby. Vanessa grabbed the envelope from Lila's hand, her face twisted with rage. This is a setup. She's lying. Lila's voice was quiet, cold. I didn't come here to beg. I came here to tell you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. She turned to leave. Wait. His voice stopped her. She looked back at him, her eyes unreadable. Why now? He asked. Why didn't you tell me? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Because you made it very clear that I didn't matter anymore. The truth of it cut deeper than any weapon. He opened his mouth to respond, but Vanessa stepped between them, her voice venomous. If you think you can just walk back into his life... I don't want back in, Lila said quietly. I just want him to know his son exists. She adjusted Ethan in her arms and walked away. He watched her disappear into the crowd, his mind spinning, his chest tight. And for the first time in 10 months, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Regret. He didn't follow her. Not immediately. Vanessa was still talking. Something sharp, something angry, but he couldn't hear her. His mind was elsewhere, on the train platform, on the baby in Lila's arms, on the envelope she had handed him like it was a death sentence. His son. He had spent his entire life building walls, creating distance, ensuring that no one could ever get close enough to hurt him. And yet, in less than 5 minutes, Lila had walked back into his world and shattered everything. Are you even listening to me? Vanessa's voice yanked him back. She was standing in front of him now, arms crossed, her face flushed with fury. I'm listening, he said flatly. Then tell me you don't believe her. He didn't respond. Her eyes widened. You're actually considering this? She had DNA results. So? Vanessa's voice rose. Anyone can fake paperwork. She's desperate. She probably saw you in the news and thought, she's not like that. The words came out before he could stop them. Vanessa stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't decide whether to scream or cry. You're defending her? He didn't answer. He turned and walked toward the exit. She grabbed his arm. Don't you dare walk away from me. He stopped, looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then back at her face. Let go, Vanessa. His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was steel beneath it. She hesitated, then released him, her jaw tight. I need to think, he said. About what? About whether you're going to throw away everything we've built for some woman who left you? I left her, he said coldly. Vanessa blinked. What? I ended it, not her. He walked away before she could respond. Lila didn't make it far. She had planned to leave the station immediately, to disappear back into the small apartment she had been renting on the edge of the city. But Ethan started crying, loudly, and she had to stop in the parking lot to calm him down. She rocked him gently, whispering soft reassurances, but her hands were shaking. Seeing him again had been harder than she expected. She had told herself she was ready, that she had moved on, that she didn't care what he thought or felt or did. But the moment their eyes met, all of those lies crumbled. She still loved him. God help her. She still loved him. Lila. She froze. His voice came from behind her, low and familiar. She didn't turn around. Please, he said quietly. Just talk to me. She took a breath, steadied herself, then turned to face him. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He looked the same as he always had, untouchable, dangerous, impossibly calm. But there was something different in his eyes now. Uncertainty. What do you want me to say? She asked. I want you to explain. Explain what? That you walked out of my life and I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later? That I tried to call you and you blocked my number? That I had to give birth alone because you made it very clear you didn't want me anymore? Her voice cracked on the last word. He flinched. Ethan let out a small whimper, and Lila immediately softened, rocking him gently until he settled. I didn't know, he said quietly. I know. Her voice was tired. That's why I'm here. He stepped closer. Can I? He hesitated. Can I see him? She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. He moved closer, slowly, like he was afraid she might disappear. When he was close enough, he looked down at the baby in her arms. Ethan was asleep, his tiny face peaceful, his little fist curled against his cheek. He looked exactly like his father. Something inside him broke. He had spent years building an empire, conquering enemies, surviving wars, but nothing had ever hit him like this. This tiny, fragile life, this child who existed because of him, his son. Can I hold him? He asked, his voice rough. Lila hesitated, then carefully transferred Ethan into his arms. For a moment, he just stood there, frozen, staring down at the baby. Ethan stirred slightly, then settled again, his small body warm and impossibly light. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process what he was feeling. All he knew was that everything had changed. Lila watched him, her heart aching. This was the man who had once promised her the world. The man who had held her like she was the only thing that mattered. And then, One day, he had looked at her with cold, empty eyes and told her it was over. No explanation. No fight. Just over. She had spent months trying to understand why, trying to figure out what she had done wrong. But now, watching him hold their son, she realized something. He hadn't left because he stopped loving her. He had left because he was terrified of it. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She blinked, surprised. "What?" "For leaving. For not explaining. For..." He stopped, his jaw tight. "For everything." She didn't know what to say. "I thought I was protecting you," he continued, his voice low. "I thought if I stayed, I'd only hurt you. My life, my world, it's not safe. It's not. Good. And you deserved better. That wasn't your choice to make," she said softly. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the truth in his eyes. He had been broken long before he met her, and he had left because he didn't believe he could be fixed. They stood in the parking lot for a long time, neither of them speaking. Ethan slept peacefully in his father's arms, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling around him. The city hummed in the distance. Cars, voices, life continuing as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. But it had. Lila watched him cradle their son, and for a moment, she let herself imagine what it might have been like if things had been different. If he had stayed. If they had raised Ethan together. If love had been enough. But love was never enough in his world. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes were still fixed on Ethan, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he finally said. She nodded, unsurprised. "You have a life now, a future. I'm not asking you to give that up. What are you asking for?" She took a breath. "I want him to know who you are. I want him to have a father, if you want to be one. But I'm not asking you to choose me." The words hurt more than she expected. He looked up at her, his eyes dark and conflicted. "And if I want both?" Her heart skipped. "What? What if I want to be in his life, and yours?" She stared at him, her mind racing. "You can't. You're with someone else. I'll end it." "No." Her voice was firm. "I didn't come here to break up your relationship. I came here to give you the truth. What you do with it is up to you. Lila, I mean it." She reached out and gently took Ethan from his arms. "I've spent 10 months learning to live without you. I'm not going to fall apart if you walk away again." It was a lie, and they both knew it. He watched her adjust Ethan in her arms, her movements careful and practiced. She had done this alone. For 10 months, she had carried the weight of their son by herself. And he hadn't been there. "Where are you staying?" he asked. She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I want to know where my son is. I have an apartment, on the east side." He frowned. "That's not safe. It's what I can afford." The words hit him like a slap. She had been struggling, alone, while he had been living in luxury with a woman who didn't love him the way Lila had. "I'll send you money," he said. "I don't want your money, Lila. I don't want your guilt either." Her voice was steady, but there was pain beneath it. "I came here to tell you about your son. That's all. I'm not asking you to save me." He stepped closer, his voice low. "What if I want to?" She looked up at him, her eyes filled with something fragile and dangerous. "Hope." "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I mean it. You left me once. You'll do it again." "No." His voice was firm. "I won't." She wanted to believe him. God. She wanted to believe him. But she had learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't answer. She was staring at the message, her hands trembling. He stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Lila, what's wrong?" She looked up at him, fear flickering in her eyes. "I need to go," she said quickly. "What happened?" "I can't explain, She adjusted Ethan in her arms and started walking toward the street. He grabbed her arm gently. "Talk to me." She pulled away. "You want to help? Then stay away from me." "Lila, I'm serious." Her voice cracked. "If you care about him, about us, you'll stay away." She turned and walked away, her pace quick, almost frantic. He watched her disappear into the night, every instinct screaming at him to follow her. But he didn't. Because he knew that look. He had seen it before, in the eyes of people who were being hunted. Back at his penthouse, Vanessa was waiting. She was sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, her expression cold. "You're back," she said flatly. He didn't respond. He walked past her toward his office. She stood, her voice rising. "Are you seriously not going to talk about this?" He stopped, his back to her. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me that woman is lying." He turned to face her. "She's not." Vanessa's face twisted. "You're choosing her over me." "I'm choosing my son." "You don't even know if that baby is yours." "He is." His voice was cold, certain. "I know he is." Vanessa stared at him, her chest heaving. "So what now? You're just going to throw away everything we've built?" "We haven't built anything, Vanessa. This was always a transaction." The truth of it hung in the air between them, her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of rage. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe," he said quietly, "but at least I'll be able to look my son in the eye." She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. Before she left, she turned back, her voice venomous. "You think she's innocent? You think she's some helpless victim?" He frowned. "What are you talking about?" Vanessa smiled, cold, sharp. "Ask her what she knows about my father's campaign funds. Ask her why she really came back." And then she was gone. He stood there, alone in the silence, his mind racing. What did Lila know? He didn't sleep that night. Vanessa's words echoed in his mind like a warning bell he couldn't silence. Ask her what she knows about my father's campaign funds. Ask her why she really came back. He sat in his office, the city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk. His mind was a war zone, torn between the image of Lila holding their son and the possibility that she had been hiding something all along. He had built his empire on information, on knowing every secret, every weakness, every lie before it could be used against him. But with Lila, he had never needed to dig. She had been the one person in his life who didn't require surveillance, suspicion, or strategy. She had been safe, or so he thought. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Didn't think I'd hear from you again." "I need information," he said flatly. "On who?" He hesitated. Saying her name out loud felt like a betrayal, but he couldn't afford to be sentimental. Not now. Lila Monroe, my ex-wife. There was a pause on the other end. "You want me to dig into her?" "Yes. Boss, with all due respect." "I didn't ask for your opinion," he cut in, his voice cold. "I asked for information. Can you do it or not?" Another pause. Then, "I'll have something by morning." "Good." He hung up and stared at the phone in his hand, a sick feeling twisting in his gut. If Lila had lied to him, if she had been using him, using their son, he would have no choice but to protect himself, even if it destroyed what was left of his heart. Lila sat in her small apartment, rocking Ethan in her arms as he fussed and squirmed. The message on her phone still burned in her mind. You have 48 hours. Deliver what you promised, or we go public. She had known this was coming. She had known the moment she decided to confront him that there would be consequences. But seeing those words, cold, threatening, final, made it real in a way she hadn't prepared for. She looked down at Ethan, his tiny face scrunched in discomfort, and her chest tightened. She had done this for him. Everything she had done, every risk she had taken, had been to give her son a chance at a better life. A life where he wasn't trapped in the shadow of his father's crimes or his mother's desperation. But now, that chance was slipping away. Her phone buzzed again. She almost didn't look, almost threw it across the room. But she forced herself to check the screen. It was a new message, from an unknown number. We need to talk. Tomorrow, noon. The cafe on 5th Street. Come alone. Her blood ran cold. She didn't recognize the number, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a request. It was an order. And she had no choice but to obey. The next morning he received the file. It was delivered in an unmarked envelope, left on his desk by one of his men. He opened it slowly, his jaw tight, his mind bracing for whatever truth lay inside. The first page was a basic background report. Lila Monroe, age 29. Former registered nurse. No criminal record, no outstanding debts, no red flags. He exhaled, a flicker of relief passing through him. But then he turned the page, and everything changed. There were bank statements, wire transfers, dates and amounts that didn't make sense. Money moving from accounts linked to Senator Greaves, Vanessa's father, into an offshore account. And then, weeks later, smaller amounts being transferred into Lila's account. Not large sums. Just enough to survive, just enough to stay hidden. His hands tightened around the papers. No. He flipped to the next page. There were emails, encrypted communications between Lila and someone using an alias. The messages were vague, carefully worded, but the implication was clear. She had been gathering information, evidence, and she had been paid for it. His chest felt like it was caving in. She had been working against him, against Vanessa's father, against the very empire he had helped build, and she had used their son to get close to him again. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. His mind was a storm of rage and heartbreak and disbelief. He wanted to call her, to demand an explanation, to scream at her for lying, for manipulating him, for making him believe, even for a moment, that they could have something real again. But he didn't. Because beneath the anger, beneath the betrayal, there was something else. A question. Why? Lila wasn't driven by greed. She never had been. She had always been the kind of person who gave more than she took, who sacrificed herself for others without expecting anything in return. So why would she risk everything, risk their son, for money? Unless she wasn't doing it for money. Unless she was doing it to survive. At noon, Lila walked into the cafe on 5th Street. It was small, quiet, the kind of place where people came to disappear. She scanned the room and spotted him immediately. A man in his 50s, well-dressed, his expression calm but calculating. He was sitting in the corner booth, a cup of coffee in front of him, his hands folded neatly on the table. She recognized him immediately. Thomas Crane, Senator Greaves's chief of staff. The man who had approached her 6 months ago with an offer she couldn't refuse. She walked over and sat down across from him, her face carefully neutral. "Miss Monroe?" he said smoothly. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't have a choice," she replied. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We all have choices. The question is whether we're willing to live with the consequences." She didn't respond. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "You were supposed to deliver the documents 2 weeks ago. We had an agreement. I needed more time." "Time?" He chuckled softly. "Time is the one thing you don't have. The senator is getting impatient. And when he gets impatient, people get hurt." Her jaw tightened. "I'll get you what you need." "Will you?" His eyes narrowed. "Or are you having second thoughts now that you've reconnected with your ex-husband?" Her heart skipped, but she kept her face expressionless. "This has nothing to do with him, doesn't it?" Crane tilted his head. "You show up at a train station with his child. You confront him in front of his mistress. You make yourself visible. That wasn't part of the plan. I did what I had to do." "No." His voice turned cold. "You did what you wanted to do. And now you've jeopardized everything." She leaned forward, her voice low and fierce. "I'm doing this for my son. That's all I care about." Crane studied her for a long moment, then sat back. "Fine. You have 24 hours. Deliver the documents, or we'll make sure your son's father knows exactly what you've been doing." Her blood ran cold. "And trust me," Crane continued, his smile sharp, "a man like him doesn't forgive betrayal. Not even from the mother of his child." She left the cafe in a daze, her mind spinning. She had known this would be dangerous. She had known there would be consequences. But she hadn't expected it to spiral out of control so quickly. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen. She had 2 choices. She could deliver the documents and betray the man she still loved, or she could refuse and lose everything. That night, he stood outside her apartment building. He had told himself he was just going to watch, to observe, to figure out what she was planning. But the moment he saw her step out of the building, her face pale and drawn, he knew something was wrong. She was carrying a small backpack, her movements quick and nervous. She glanced over her shoulder twice before heading down the street. He followed her. She walked for 15 minutes, cutting through alleys and side streets, until she reached an old warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. She paused at the entrance, took a breath, then slipped inside. He waited a moment, then followed. Inside, the warehouse was dark and cold, the air thick with the smell of rust and decay. He moved silently, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon concealed beneath his coat. And then he heard voices. "Don't care what your excuses are. We had a deal." He recognized the voice immediately. Thomas Crane. He crept closer, staying in the shadows until he could see them. Lila was standing in the center of the room, her backpack clutched in her hands. Crane was in front of her, flanked by 2 armed men. "I have the documents," she said quietly. Crane held out his hand. "Then give them to me." She hesitated. "Now, Miss Monroe." She unzipped the backpack slowly, her hands trembling. And that's when he stepped out of the shadows. "She's not giving you anything." Every head turned toward him. Lila's eyes went wide. "What are you—" Crane's expression darkened. "Well, this is unexpected." He walked forward, his gaze cold and lethal. "You have 10 seconds to walk away." Crane laughed. "Or what? You'll kill me? In front of your ex-wife? In front of witnesses?" "I don't need witnesses," he said quietly. "I just need you gone." The 2 armed men stepped forward, but he didn't flinch. "Last chance," he said. Crane's smile faded. He stared at him for a long moment, then nodded to his men. "We're leaving." "But this isn't over." They walked out, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. And then it was just the two of them. Lila stared at him, her chest heaving. "You shouldn't have come. You were in danger. I can handle myself." Clearly. His voice was sharp, angry. "You've been lying to me, working with them, using our son." "I wasn't using him." Her voice cracked. "I was trying to protect him." He stopped. "What?" Tears filled her eyes. "They threatened me. They said if I didn't get them evidence on Vanessa's father, they'd make sure I lost Ethan. They said they'd prove I was unfit, that I was dangerous, and I believed them." His chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you left me," she shouted. "You walked away like I was nothing. And when I needed you most, you weren't there." The truth of it hit him like a freight train. She had been alone, scared, desperate, and he had abandoned her. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's too late." "No." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "It's not. I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Not again." She stared at him, her breath hitching. "You don't understand. They'll come after us, after Ethan." "Let them try." His voice was steel. "I'll destroy anyone who touches you. Anyone who even thinks about touching our son." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. His forehead pressed against hers. "I never stopped either." They didn't leave the warehouse immediately. For a long time, they just stood there, holding each other in the cold darkness, letting the weight of everything they had been carrying finally settle. Lila's face was buried against his chest, her tears soaking through his shirt. He held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I know. I don't know how to keep fighting." "You don't have to fight alone anymore." She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red, swollen eyes. "What are we going to do?" He hesitated. The answer wasn't simple. It never was in his world. "We're going to end this," he said finally. "All of it." "How?" His jaw tightened. "I'm going to take down Senator Greaves, and everyone working with him." Her eyes widened. "You can't. He's too powerful. He has connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. If you go after him, he'll destroy you." "Then I'll destroy him first." "And what about Ethan?" Her voice broke. "What happens to him if you start a war?" He didn't have an answer. Because she was right. Starting a war with someone like Greaves didn't just put him at risk. It put everyone he loved in the crosshairs, including his son. They returned to her apartment in silence. Ethan was asleep in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. Lila stood in the doorway, watching him, her arms wrapped around herself. He came up behind her, his voice soft. "He looks like you." She smiled faintly. "He has your eyes." "Does he cry a lot? Only when he's hungry? Or tired? Or needs a diaper change?" She glanced back at him. "So, yes, a lot." He chuckled, the sound rough and unfamiliar. He hadn't laughed in months, maybe longer. She turned to face him fully. "You don't have to do this, you know. You don't have to be here. I want to be here. But do you know how?" Her voice was gentle, not accusing. "Do you know how to be a father?" He looked at Ethan, then back at her. "No, but I want to learn." Her eyes softened. That's all I needed to hear. They spent the next few hours talking. She told him everything about the pregnancy, the birth, the sleepless nights, and the fear that she was doing everything wrong. She told him about the moment Crane approached her, offering her money and security in exchange for information on Senator Greaves. "I didn't want to do it," she said quietly, "but I didn't have a choice. I had no money, no family, no one to turn to, and they knew that. They knew I was vulnerable. You should have come to me. You made it very clear you didn't want me in your life." He flinched. "I was trying to protect you." "By breaking my heart?" He didn't have an answer for that. She sighed, exhausted. "It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. The question is, what happens next?" He stood, pacing the small living room. His mind was already working, calculating, planning. He had spent years navigating the dangerous world of organized crime, surviving betrayals and power plays and assassination attempts. But this was different. This wasn't about survival. This was about protecting the people he loved, and he would do whatever it took. "I need to see the documents," he said. She hesitated. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to take down Greaves, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." She retrieved the backpack and handed it to him. He opened it and pulled out a thick folder filled with financial records, emails, and photographs. He spread them across the table, his eyes scanning the pages quickly. What he saw made his blood run cold. The documents detailed years of illegal activity: money laundering, bribery, election fraud, connections to international crime syndicates. Senator Greaves wasn't just corrupt. He was a criminal mastermind operating behind the facade of a respectable politician. And Vanessa knew. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. She had been using him all along. Not for love, not for partnership, but for protection. She needed someone powerful enough to shield her father's empire from enemies. And he had been the perfect pawn. "This is worse than I thought," he muttered. Lila sat down beside him. "What are you going to do?" He looked at her, his expression hard. "I'm going to make sure they can't hurt us. Any of us." "How?" "By doing what I do best." He gathered the documents and put them back in the folder. "I'm going to make them disappear." The next morning, he called a meeting with his most trusted men. They gathered in a private room in one of his establishments, a club that served as a front for his operations. 6 men, all of them loyal, all of them dangerous. He laid the folder on the table. "Senator Greaves and his people have been targeting my family," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "They threatened the mother of my son. They tried to use her against me. And now, they're going to pay for it." One of his men, Marcus, his right hand, leaned forward. "What do you need from us?" "I need information. I need leverage. And I need it fast." He tapped the folder. "These documents prove Greaves is dirty, but they're not enough to bring him down. I need more." "What kind of more?" another man asked. "Witnesses, recordings, anything that ties him directly to criminal activity. Something the media can't ignore. Something law enforcement can't sweep under the rug." Marcus nodded. "We'll get it." "Good. And one more thing." He looked around the table, his gaze sharp. "No one touches Lila or my son. Anyone who even looks at them the wrong way answers to me. Understood?" "Understood." Lila didn't hear from him for 2 days. She tried to focus on Ethan, on keeping her routine as normal as possible. But every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. She was terrified that Crane would come back, that Greaves would send someone after her, that everything would fall apart before it even had a chance to begin. But then, on the 3rd day, he showed up at her door. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his jaw tight with tension. But there was something else in his expression. Victory. "It's done," he said. She stared at him. "What do you mean?" He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Greaves. His entire operation. It's finished." "How?" He pulled out his phone and showed her a news headline. "Senator Greaves arrested on charges of corruption, fraud, and racketeering." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." "It's going to be all over the news by tonight," he said. "The FBI has everything. Bank records, emails, testimony from people inside his organization. He's not getting out of this." Tears filled her eyes. "It's really over?" "It's over." She let out a shaky breath, her body sagging with relief. "What about Vanessa?" His expression darkened. "She's being investigated too. She won't be a problem anymore." Lila looked up at him, her voice trembling. "You did this for us." "I did this for you," he corrected. "For Ethan. For the life we should have had." She stepped closer, her hand resting on his chest. "What happens now?" He covered her hand with his. "Now, we start over. The right way." That night, they sat together on the couch, Ethan sleeping peacefully between them. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "The domestic thing, the family thing." "Neither do I," she said with a small smile. "But we'll figure it out. Together." He looked down at his son, then back at her. "I love you," he said quietly. "I never stopped." Her eyes filled with tears. "I love you too." He leaned in and kissed her. Softly, gently, like he was afraid she might break. And for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. 6 months later. The house was nothing like his old penthouse. It was smaller, quieter, tucked away in a peaceful neighborhood where children played in the streets, and neighbors waved to each other in the mornings. It had a backyard, something he never thought he'd care about, and a nursery painted soft blue with stars on the ceiling. It was home. He stood in the kitchen, making breakfast, or trying to. The eggs were slightly burnt, the toast a little too dark, but Lila just laughed when she saw it, kissing his cheek and taking over before he could ruin anything else. "You're getting better," she teased. "Liar." She smiled. "Okay, maybe not, but you're trying. That's what matters." Ethan babbled from his high chair, banging a spoon against the tray. He was 6 months old now, his eyes bright and curious, his laugh the best sound in the world. He walked over and scooped him up, holding him high in the air. Ethan shrieked with delight, his tiny hands reaching for his father's face. "Who's the boss now, huh?" he said, grinning. Lila laughed. "He is. And you know it." He couldn't argue with that. His empire hadn't disappeared. He still had power, still had influence. But he had stepped back from the front lines, delegating more, choosing his battles carefully. Because now, he had something more important to protect. He had learned to change diapers, badly at first, but he got the hang of it. He had learned to soothe Ethan when he cried in the middle of the night, rocking him gently and humming off-key lullabies that somehow worked. He had learned that love wasn't a weakness. It was the only thing that made him strong. Lila went back to nursing part-time, working at a community clinic that served low-income families. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. And she was happy. They had their struggles. There were nights when old wounds resurfaced, when trust felt fragile, when the weight of their past threatened to pull them under. But they fought for each other. Every single day. Because they knew what it was like to lose each other. And they weren't going to let it happen again. One evening, as the sun set over the backyard, they sat together on the porch steps. Ethan was asleep in his father's arms, his little head resting against his chest. Do you ever miss it? Lila asked softly. The life you had before? He thought about it. The power, the control, the constant adrenaline of living on the edge. No, he said honestly. I don't. She looked at him surprised. Really? Really. He looked down at Ethan, then at her. This is better. This is real. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm proud of you. For what? For choosing us. He kissed the top of her head. It wasn't a choice. It was the only thing that made sense. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. And for the first time in his life, he felt at peace. He had built an empire on fear and power, but he had found his kingdom in love. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. Stories like these take time, heart, and dedication to create, and your support means everything. If this story touched your heart, please consider making a donation through YouTube's Super Thanks. It helps us continue bringing you powerful, emotional stories every week. Joining our members club. Get early access to videos and exclusive content made just for you. Your support allows us to keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep sharing stories that matter. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. See you in the next story.